Thank you for tuning in to my weekly Q&A video. It could be because the IRS chose to not register that I actually paid my taxes last week that I'm going to be complaining and ranting a little bit on some of the answers that I'm going to go over today. But probably it has more to do with the fact that the internet has some bad habits, and the way people teach on the internet is not always really helping the people that are trying to learn something. So remember that if you have a question that you want me to answer in a Q&A, then leave a comment on the video or send me a message on Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat. That's kind of how I usually get the questions, and of course the questions are also mostly about playing jazz guitars or improvising, chords, harmony, theory, and also sometimes about gear, and they're all welcome. If you have other ideas for questions, then they're welcome too. So yeah, leave a question if you have anything you want to ask me. And in this video I'm going to talk about Tetra Chords, chains of dominant seventh chords, how to use jazz chords in metal, and how to efficiently think of related modes. I already asked something similar, but I'll ask again. In gypsy jazz there are a number of standards that have circled dominant chords in harmony, usually in a circle of fifths or fourths. Never actually knew how to look at this, but I mean on this: D7, G7, C7, F7 and so on. I find it pretty difficult to improvise over this. I'm not sure, can a man find these in modern jazz? If you give us some overview on this thought, that would be great. So from this you can at least see that if you don't get an answer the first time you ask a question, you can always just ask it again, and then maybe I'll get to it the second time. So dominant chains. Yeah, dominant chains are indeed quite common, not only in stuff you'll find in gypsy jazz. I think it's something you'll find also or I know it's something you find in a lot of standards. And yeah, so the thing you need to sort of think about with these dominant chains is probably that there are, well, we need to figure out what scale we can use on them, and then there are sort of a few exceptions that you need to be aware of as well. So if we have a chain of dominance, it's gonna resolve in like upper fourth or down a fifth, so D to G and G to C and C to F, like you've written in the question. And okay, so there are two types of dominance. If you think in terms of key, which is what I would suggest you do if you're playing a standard because it is in a key, then you need to use the key to sort of determine what scale you expect to be there. Well, you need the key and you need the melody on that dominant, in fact. Those are the two things you need to look at, and that will tell you what scale fits. And the idea is that if you have a D7, if it resolves to a major chord, so G major 7 for instance, then you would use G major on it. So you would use D mixolydian or G major or D dominant, or so basically that scale. If you have a D7 that resolves to a minor chord, then you would use a G minor scale, so G harmonic minor, or D Phrygian major, D mixolydian flat 9, flat 13, whatever you want to call it, it's all the same thing. And basically those are the two options that you kind of have whenever you have a chain of dominance. And then you need to look at, if you have a dominant, where would you expect it to resolve in the key? So if a song is in B flat and you have a D7, and even though it's a D7, in this case like D7, G7, C7, F7, that would be something that is not, most of those chords except for the F7 is not to be found in B flat. But D7, even if it is resolving to a G7 here, if we're in B flat, we would expect it to resolve to a G minor chord, and then probably that's the type of sound you want to hear there. So then you would play that as a harmonic minor type dominant. And the same would go for G7, would normally resolve to a C minor chord, so you would also use C harmonic minor over that G7. Then for the C7, that normally resolves to an F major chord, because it resolves to an F7, so you would use just C7. This all actually mostly has to do with the fact that you want to have a dominant scale that's really close in material to what you have in the key. That's kind of what that boils down to. So D7, if you play G major on top of that, that's a little bit far away from B flat major. And then you do have exceptions to this, because I think when we talked about this on the when I got this question, we were talking a little bit in a few comments back and forth, and we were talking about Sweet Georgia Brown and Caravan, I think, and those are both exceptions to this rule, because if you have those and you look at the melody that's there, so let's take Sweet Georgia Brown, because those are also exactly those chords. So that's the key of Sweet Georgia Brown in this case is an F major, and the chords are D7, G7, C7 to F in the beginning, and the melody, if I play it like this, the melody has an E, so that's a natural 9, and it has a B, so a natural 13. So the D7 that we have in this case, the melody is the strongest thing. That's the kind of sound, that's what you hear when you're playing the song and you start soloing. You hear the melody, and if you don't take that into account, then your scale choices are actually going to throw you off a bit. So so that's going to be, you have to start with what fits with the melody, and then everything you do that's not going to fit with the melody, you kind of have to look at it as a sort of a reharmonization. And that's in this one for sure that you're probably not going to find a lot of recordings of Sweet Georgia Brown where they start off by playing that kind of sound on the place where that melody is. So they would really play it as a D7 from G major. And then for the rest it's not so interesting, because G7 and C7 you would also just use the Maximilian scale, and that's what you hear there. I think the same thing actually goes for I Got Rhythm. There the melody is also kind of suggesting that, or not kind of, it's also suggesting that you have like a dominant with no altered extension, so it's a dominant, a D7 resolving to G in the bridge. And that's why we play it like that also, because that's one of those places where if you just look at the key and you don't look at the melody of the original, like rhythm changes, we never think about that as really coming from I Got Rhythm, but that's where that progression is coming from, and that's actually the reason why we're choosing the extensions that we're choosing when we are playing just all the other rhythm changes themes, like Anthropology and Moose and Mooch and stuff like that. They don't really have alterations on the bridge in that way. Or maybe if they do, they have them just before they resolve, and then it's another sort of function of it. So in that way you need to sort of look at that. So you look at the melody and you look at the key, and that's how you're gonna figure out which scale you use when you're playing on it. And then, I mean, there are episodes written on how to improvise in these things. In general, it's good to just have a period where you really just sit down and improvise solos over like a chain of dominants. That's a good exercise, because you're bound to come across it. If you're playing 50 standards, then you'll probably have most of them covered anyway, at least if you also play with some vocalists and you have to move stuff around. It's stuff you need. And don't be afraid to keep it really clear. So, and in those cases, like the way you want to practice that, probably the first thing you want to do is just the dominance without any alteration. So not harmonic minor, but so on and so forth. And you can just sit down and play. I mean, probably where you want to start with it is just keep it simple. So really take one position, just go over all the different arpeggios so that you know where they are. You can do the Barry Harris exercise on it too. So you do like, I start on D now, I think. I'm pretty sure, just to have some sort of small idea of the fragments, and then you just have to sit down and go from chord to chord. So just go over that, and that's, I mean, you can of course do that with a backing track, then it becomes a little bit more clear, but in general you probably want to do it without the backing track so you can hear what's going on. And there's little else to it. I mean, you resolve a dominant to another dominant in the same way that you would normally do it, so you're just going to be aiming for the third or the fifth. And I guess that's kind of all there is to it, really. Of course, like, just do the normal exercises. It's a good way to get around 12 keys, and since you anyway need it for the songs, why not? You know. In the beginning, maybe stay in one position so that you have a good overview of all the keys. And then, I mean, if you have a song where you come across another dominant chain that does have like a harmonic minor sound in there, then you just need to take that into account as well. Let me see if I can think of one. Well, if you have the song There's Some Great Love, then that starts with like B, so it's in B flat major, so B flat, E flat, A flat, G. And on the G, you would probably expect sort of a harmonic minor sound. Actually, I don't think that's in the melody, but that's what people mostly play there, though. So, and then you would just sort of work on playing through those dominants. And again, in general, when we play stuff, it's not. You want to keep it simple because you want to actually play stuff that you can hear what's going on. So that's why you want to play stuff that's to the third, really. So if I play on. Sort of just a few ideas on that. So really, just when I play this, I think you can pretty easily hear. Of course, you need to know the song, but still, I think if you know the song, you can hear it. And that's sort of the important thing, that you play something that's clear and really following the harmony. And don't be afraid to be basic. I think we spend too much time by trying not to be basic, and it's usually just making things difficult in a way that's also kind of stopping us from progressing and really learning stuff. So since it's anyway a progression that's moving a lot, like a dominant chain, then you might just as well just simply play the movement and at least be sure that you know how to work freely within that before you start doing something else. And that really means arpeggios and target notes, and really think like play to the third of the next chord, play to the fifth of the next chord, those kind of things. I think that's what's important with these types of progressions. And that goes for Caravan and certainly also for Sweet Georgia Brown as well. You might have a little bit of time on something like Sweet Georgia Brown where you're going to be, because it's like 4 bars of D7 in the beginning, and you might have some part of that line is going to be just on the D7, but then at a certain point it's going to be stuff that needs to move on to the G7, and the same is going to go for the G7, that you have you sit there for a bit, but then you have a line that goes on to the next one, and you just do that in a nice and clear way so everybody can hear what's going on, because that's how you actually play the song. If you do something else, you're moving away from playing the song, and you have to at least do that on purpose. So I hope that helps a bit. Mostly it's just like what scales do you use, and also a little bit how do you practice playing these kind of progressions in a simple way, and also that you can really make it into just an exercise unto itself and just play in these dominant chains and get really good to it. I think that that's not going to be a waste of time if you do that for half a year, you know. I think I did that. At least I did the Barry Harris thing in all keys, in all positions for a long time at some point, and I think I did the improvising along with it as well. But it's a long time ago, so I don't really know anymore. I don't remember. But I hope this helps, and otherwise you can just ask the question a third time and see if we can get a better answer out of me. Could you please share what you think are the most dark, exotic, tense chords in jazz guitar that could essentially be used in metal music? Mainly for extended chords. I like minor major 9, major 7 sharp 5 or major 7 sharp 11, which I base off harmonic minor. I like to take jazz concepts and apply it to metal music. Thanks. So obviously I'm not a metal guitar player, and even if I listen to some metal and I like it, and some of the stuff that I'm listening to sort of ranges from the atonal to the very tonal stuff, I guess metal is almost always really in minor keys. So I can't really tell you sort of the most dark or tense or what was the other word, exotic chords, because I don't think, I mean, then you can move into sort of the stuff that gets atonal really quickly, and of course you can do that. You can just sort of take apart diminished scales or augmented scales and try and figure out some chords from there. Whether it really is gonna work if you play it with a lot of distortion is maybe the question. I mean, I think what you see when bands start playing into the really sort of atonal things, then it becomes much more unisono, but because then you're talking about people like Sugar, for instance, who's for a big part at least quite atonal in the way they work with things, and that means that just every note is just a bunch of, I guess there's sort of a root, but it's just that and then some leading notes. So for that I guess I can't really answer the question. There are some chords that I see, because I also teach, I see some chords being used in music, so in metal music that are having extensions. They tend actually not to be the ones that I would consider tense. I mean, a lot of this thing is, if a chord is dark or tense or something, it's gonna be not just the sound of the chord. It's gonna be it's probably gonna be more about the context that it's in, and so that means that you probably want to work on extending your, if you want to play something that's not atonal, want to work on your ability to make progressions, and the way you really study that is just to analyze songs, really. And probably if you want to have stuff that moves around in keys and stuff, it's not so much going to be metal as it's going to be jazz tunes, I guess. And even though Have You Met Miss Jones is pretty far away from Enter Sandman or whatever, that is probably a better place to look for other harmony for that. So that I can't really talk too much about. I think if you look at especially the last 10-15 years, there's been much more use of extended chords in metal. They've kind of picked up on that. Not only, I think some of that is probably coming out of Steve Vai actually, but also just other people, like there's a Kill Switch Engage song that has this kind of progression, which is essentially, now I'm playing it in another tuning kind of, but which is stuff like a G minor, B flat major 7, D minor. So that's a D minor progression, and that's how that sort of works. And where you get, and so here you have, and they use that, I think, like they have everything where they're like going choking on the lower strings, which is of course usually 9 out of 10 or 99 out of 100 metal pieces, the root of the piece is going to be whatever is on the lower string. That you kind of know that they almost never do anything else, and that's also the case here. So G minor, B flat major, and then so that's just, I don't have a drop D here, so I'm just going to take the high D, and that's the progression. And I think So it's a G minor 9, B flat major 7 with a 9, and then just a D minor 7. And I think those kind of things lend themselves well to also, at least in kill switching case, I think they get away with it really well. I think a lot of the sort of the more gent-based stuff that isn't like Meshuggah, but is more tonal. I think most of Periphery and stuff like that is really also a lot of chords with extensions. There I don't really remember any pieces, but I have taught some of them, and they tend to be sort of minor progressions, but then chords with extensions. So if it's in E minor, they will play an E minor 9 and a C major 7 flat 5 or something. And I mean, you can experiment with that. I think, yeah, like I said, I think that it's probably gonna give you more if you really start looking at what you can do in terms of mixing up the progressions and get better at working with progressions. And you're gonna probably get better at that by analyzing songs, as I mentioned. So stands. Actually, you can also analyze stuff like Radiohead for more sort of. They use some more extensions as well. I mean, they're not a metal band, but they do have songs with a little bit more advanced harmony than just sort of the typical minor thing, which is somewhere between harmonic minor and natural minor all the time, which is what most metal is. And that's perfectly fine. I mean, that's sort of, it's also part of the genre, I guess, the same way as blues is a certain sound. So that is not necessarily wrong or anything, but you can always look and see if you can take it somewhere else. But you're gonna have to look in the progressions more than in the chords, probably. So the best thing I can say is actually I can't answer the question really, because it's about getting some good ideas, and I would expect that you probably will find that you need to look at the combination of chords rather than the actual voicings that you need. For the rest you can use, I mean, what I see people use a lot is like the shell voicings are really popular. And you can of course make something with that, but like the way I'm playing it now, it's diatonic and it's going to sound fairly melodic also, and depends on what you want with it really. It's hard to say what works. I'd never hear a lot of dominant chords being used. I really hear mostly like the minor chords and then the major 7 chords on the 6th degree of the scale. That's sort of the stereotype thing that you'll hear, like, which they've been doing since grunge almost, I guess. And you can start messing with it. I mean, you can experiment with using 2 minor chords instead of a major 7 for one of them. That will already open up a lot, because that's sort of a disguised also dominant. But yeah, or try to work with dominance, you know, or those kind of sounds, because I don't really hear them a lot in that genre. I could be wrong, but I don't think they're using it a lot. I think it's mostly like sort of the minor and the major 7 sounds. Could also has to do with the fact that the amount of gain makes it difficult to really do altered dominance and stuff like that. I don't know. That will be a reason as well. So yeah, I hope that helps a bit. I can only talk about it like this because the other things, I don't think, yeah, as I said, the dark, tense, exotic, I think those are terms that are not that meaningful for me in terms of chords, because a C major triad can be dark and tense if you play it in the right context in a piece in G flat or something, you know. So it's not about the chord type, it's more about the context that it's in, I think. Hey Jens, do you have any advice on how to efficiently think of related modes? For example, when you wish to play a Lydian flat 7 mode over a dominant chord, would you think of the parent melodic minor scale or the actual mode? if you just think of melodic minor, how do you do so in a way that quickly gets you to the correct scale? Thanks. So I guess I don't think in related modes at all. I just think the chords that are there, and then I think about the context they're in, which maybe I'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later, but just to stick with the related mode thing. So if it's a Lydian dominant, so B flat 7, sharp 11, then that's what I'm thinking. I'm not thinking about it being F melodic minor, really. I mean, I know it is, but I can't really have this thing that I need to figure out the scale while I'm playing. That's never going to work. You need to do that sort of research and practice before you start playing, and you need to have it down. So you don't have to think about it. If you have to think about it, it's gonna screw up the solo. It's gonna ruin your ability to just lean back and listen to what is going on in the music and where your solo should go next, because you're busy thinking about what is the fifth and how do I play the melodic minor from the fifth of the chord. There's no time for stuff like that. So that means that you just need to check out how to play all the modes that you kind of need. So basically, it is all the chord types that you need. You need to check out how to play them, and I don't think there are that many actually. I never counted them, but I mean, you need well, we can try. So we need all the modes from the major scale, more or less. Then we have Phrygian on top of it, kind of. Then you need, well, I guess you need 3 modes from melodic minor, maybe 4 sometimes, but like that's one you don't need. And then you need 1 mode from harmonic minor, and that's about it. So there are not that many modes that you really need to know. You just need to know how to place them, and also you need to know the modes, and then you need to know how they work in the context where you need to play them also. So that's kind of what you want to work on. So if you have to play a Lydian dominant, you just need to know your Lydian dominant scale that well. And of course, I never practice the Lydian dominant scale. I just use F melodic minor on a B flat 7. But I did, I guess I did sort of take that note material and then just sit down and go. The thing is, if I start thinking F melodic minor, then I'm thinking F, and then the notes that I'm going to be emphasizing are going to be different. And then with melodic minor, that's not going to be, that doesn't necessarily have to become a huge issue, but at the same time, you're still having target notes that are not sort of the important notes in the chord, so you're not leaning on the D and the B flat as much. And you're probably going to be more on the C and the A flat, and that might not really work that well. And also you're thinking one thing but you're hearing something else. And tricky business. I wouldn't do it at all. I would say just go for really knowing what the scale is that you want to play, and then figure out how to play it, so that if you see a Lydian dominant, you just exactly know what a Lydian dominant is and what it sounds like. And of course you need to check out how to use. I mean, I even practice playing like an F minor major arpeggio on B flat 7, because that's a certain sound that I like and I use it. But I'm not thinking F melodic minor. I'm actually just sort of thinking about a certain set of notes that have a certain tension on top of a B flat 7. So in that way, that's sort of the thing you need to work with. And I think with the calculation I just did, where we came up with like 12, 13 different modes you need to know, that's not really a lot. And you can easily check all of that out. It's not a huge deal. It's going to be much more important to learn how to look at the chord and then understand it in the key, because something like a Lydian dominant, of course you can have pieces where you have a Lydian dominant for 10 minutes, and then you actually almost have time to learn how to play F melodic minor on top of it. But most of the time in the music that I play, something like a B flat 7 is going to be a passing chord that's going to resolve to someplace else. But then it becomes important that you know where it's going and what key you're in. And that's going to tell you how the notes are. That's why I'm talking about this thing with functional harmony, that I'm thinking in terms of not so much just a chord and a scale, but also the chord in the context of a key and in the context of a progression, so that you're not only thinking about one chord, but you're also thinking about the next chord and the chord you came from. And in that way, because that's how the music sounds. The music doesn't sound like, it's not like we've forgotten what the verse sounds like when we're in the chorus of a tune. That's just not how it works. So they are in a context, and you want to sort of keep that in mind when you're trying to understand how the chord sounds and how it's supposed to be played. So with the Lydian dominant, because that's an interesting example for this, a Lydian dominant in a major key can be quite a lot of things. Commonly it will be it can be like a 4 minor chord. So if a B flat 7 is resolving to C major, so that would be something. It can be a tritone substitute, so maybe that could also be in C still though, resolving to A minor. And on the dominant of the dominant, you'll get a Lydian dominant as well, quite often. Mostly out of, I guess mostly out of habit in jazz, but it is very common if you listen to people play, that whenever they have in major they have the dominant of the dominant, which is a common chord, they'll play a Lydian dominant there. So in that way you need to know that as well, because that's going to also influence how you play the chord. And that's very important as well, because it means that other notes might be important. So in some cases the third is more important than the seventh, or the other way around. There's going to be stuff like that happening. And also, if you know what type of chord it is, you know where it's going, so you know how it's going to sound when it resolves. If you just know that it's a Lydian dominant, you have no idea where it's going, and you don't know how to connect it to the next chord that's coming. So that's why you want to know the function of that chord, if it's working as a dominant, if it's working as a 4 minor chord, stuff like that. So yeah, so to sum it up, you need to know basically just, okay, this is this type of sound, and you don't want to have extra steps in there. You actually want to practice everything you practice so that you can hear it on top of it. So all the triad pairs and all that stuff, whatever you might be doing, this is something that you practice so that you can think of it related to the B flat 7 and hear it on the B flat 7, and that you don't have to think about too many other like structures. It has to become a part of your playing on a completely different level before you start really using it, or at least before you can really make music with it. It's my experience. And the other thing is not directly what you're asking, but be aware that you're probably better off thinking in terms of a key and in terms of what the chord is doing there. In all cases, if you can figure out what that is, it's going to tell you more about how it sounds, and that's going to make it easier to play. So the thing that's missing always is that we want to have a theory that actually tries to describe what we hear, and modes don't do that at all. They just tell you this is a sound and this is a scale. That's all they do. Where it's better to just have an idea about, okay, this is actually a chord that's going there, or at least it's going there, there, there. So, but you have an idea where it's going, and I think that's a better theory. That's why I'm always talking about functional theory. Hey Jens, what are your thoughts on minor tetrachords? Great videos, Ivo. Well, thank you. I'm glad you like the videos. So tetrachords. I think when I first got the question, this is also one of those questions where I think my response was, I don't know exactly what it is. I need to go Google it. Because I mean, I've heard of tetrachords before, but my only association with that's so long ago that I heard about it that my only association was, this is something that I can't really use for anything, so I'm not gonna check it out really. So I thought this was an interesting excuse to just look at what it was. And so a tetrachord, just to describe it, is basically 4 notes out of a scale. So a major tetrachord in C would be, and a minor one would be, so basically just the first 4 notes of that scale. And then the idea is apparently that if you have a C major scale, then it's first a C tetrachord and then a G tetrachord. So you have 2 tetrachords and they together they make a major scale. And you can do the same with a minor scale. And probably you can make different versions of it, and then you can get all the other scales as well. I don't know. The thing with this is that when I look at, I mean, it's a scale fragment. It's, if you want to play all the Tetra chords in the major scale, you just play it in groups of 4. Check out some Ingrid Malmsteen, he does it often, also with harmonic minor, and that's a thing. You can, I guess you can do that with it. For the rest, I don't really see what you can, like, I don't find it very useful because it's not, it's hard to be melodic with because you have a huge gap in there. So in this case, like if you have, take the minor one because that was in the question, so that would be like C, D, E flat, F, and then you have a gap up to the next one. So you have to combine it with something else to make it into something that's easy to play melodies with. And what you're going to end up with if you combine it is the scale that you would normally use. So that doesn't really make too much sense to me, actually. I think that's just a little bit silly. When I was looking into this, what I did was just, as I said, I would Google it, and then I would read some lessons and Wikipedia and stuff like that, just to see what definitions there were, what they referenced. And I see a lot of descriptions of what it is, and also a lot of lessons that claim to teach it. And of course, well, they do teach it, just they're teaching exactly the information I just explained, but they don't. There's not even an attempt at making music with it. So yeah. So, and that's also the feeling I have from it. Is also it's not really worth your while checking out. I don't see any real benefit from it. Of course, that's just my experience. I just looked superficially, but I'm used to looking at structures and then thinking, oh, well, actually this can be used for this and this can be used for, that's how I work a lot of the time when I'm trying to come up with new stuff for my solos. So I should be fairly experienced in that. And for this, it's like, yeah, it's a bit of scale, and you can play something in that small region, and then you'll sound like you're messing about in part of the scale. And that's about it. You can't even build a triad in it because there's no fifth. So I would suggest you can better start working on just scales. I mean, if you learned the Tetra chord, you've learned 4 notes. If you learn 3 more notes, you have the whole scale, and then you have that overview. And thinking of that as being 2 Tetra chords, that's just a step too much. You don't need to worry about it, really. So for learning scales, I don't think it's very useful. Maybe for other instruments it might be useful, might technically make sense in some ways that I'm not aware of, on trumpet or saxophone. I don't know. For guitar, nah, don't think so. And yeah, so what you could better do is like work with your scales, check out like the stuff that I'm most often talking about, like just check out everything, even the most silly thing that you can move around in the scale. Do that and just see what it yields, see what it sounds like. Of course, you can do you can even do the Tetrachords in a scale. It's just a scale in groups of 4. It's not really difficult. But you can also like check out all the other things. So all the diatonic, triads, arpeggios, and if you want to go away from those and have other sounds, then you start moving into quartal harmony. You can do sus chords, sus triads. And there's like other sounds that are not strictly diatonic chords, like dominant flat 5, or dominant sharp 5, or major 7 flat 5. Those kind of chords and arpeggios are useful when you're playing on chords in a jazz context. I think this sort of a 4-note scale fragment within a fourth or an augmented fourth is not going to be that useful in that respect, in my opinion anyway. But of course, if you have some examples, then I would be all ears. I mean, if you have great music that's made with Tetra chords, then sure. Then I have no idea. It's also. I think it's some stuff that people have been writing articles on because they didn't know what to write articles on, and then they're just, or it's getting searched a lot or something. I don't know, it seems like almost an excuse to just have content, because I find that if you write an article about something and you want to explain what it is, I mean, it is of course important that you explain what it is, but if it does not have any function, if you can't use it musically, then why are you writing articles about it? Then you should just write an article that says, this is not very relevant, go study something that actually works. But yeah, that's just my opinion. And obviously, again, if you have stuff that where it is being used in a way that's musically making sense, then and especially if it's in a jazz context, then I'm always open to suggestions, of course. So yeah, so I would say Tetra Chords. My thoughts on Tetra Chords is don't waste your time on it and just learn your scales. Learn all the other things that are more relevant to the music you're playing if you're trying to play jazz. And then we can just leave that as the end of my Tetra Chord rant. So there were some answers to some of the questions I got from you guys. If you like this video, then you can of course subscribe to my channel. That's one way of supporting me in making these videos. And another thing you can do is also you can check out my web store, because in that way it's also going to help me continue making these videos. And I post new stuff to my web store every month. So I tend to make 1 or 2 lessons every month for the web store, and there are more in-depth lessons than what I have on YouTube. I take it that you already know what's going on YouTube if you're seeing this video. Another thing you can do also just to stay up to date with that is of course just to subscribe to my newsletter. You can do that on my website, and then you'll also be up to date with if I post something new in the web store or if other things are coming. If I'm collaborating with somebody on a video, like I have a jam coming up with Chris Super, and there are more stuff sort of on the horizon, so that's worth checking out. For the rest, if you have a question for one of these Q&A videos, then leave a comment on the video, or send me a message, or a post on the wall of my Facebook, or yeah, send me a PM on Instagram or Twitter or Snapchat, and then hopefully I can get to answer it. It's fun to do these Q&As for sure, as you can tell, even when I'm ranting on about Tetra Chords and being really vague about metal chords, no, jazz chords in metal. But yeah, it's kind of fun to sort of think about all these things, because I get to think about stuff from a completely different angle than what I normally do, and I like that. And I also like to hear sometimes all the input that I get from you guys in the comments. So for that, that's great. Yeah, so that's about it. New lesson on Thursday, and thank you for watching.